Okay, so here is one of my favorite design patterns. Okay, so the facade pattern, and this is really important, guys. So I really see a very big value addition when it comes to this facade pattern. Okay, so let me actually show you what is that and why is that is really needed. Okay, so this actually provides a unified interface for set of subsystems. Okay, so let me show you that. So I'm going to ask you a simple question. Okay, so here let's assume that we have a task. Okay, and in order to complete this task you need to talk to three different systems. Okay, let's say that S1, S2 and S3. Okay, so you have three different systems here, S2 and S3. Okay, and you have three clients. So there are multiple clients, C1, C2 and C3. Client means somebody who is making a call. Okay, now, so in order to complete the task, so what C1 need to do? So if it need to complete a task T, so C1 need to talk to all three different systems. Okay, so it needs to talk to S1, it needs to talk to S2 and S3. Now same thing happens with C2. So C2 needs to talk to S1 for completing the task, S2 and S3. Okay, and let's say C3. So C3 also need to talk to all three systems. Okay, so this is your pattern. So you can clearly see that this is very clumsy. So that is because each system, each client is actually talking to all three different systems. Okay, and what if I introduce some change? So I'm actually trying to introduce a change, and let's say that this I'm going to replace S3 with S4. Okay, so if I have to replace S3 with S4, what should I do? No, I should go to all the clients and I should make this modification so that I switch from S2 to S4. Okay, so this is really clumsy. So let me show it in a different way. So let me see how we can slightly change the thought perspective. So we have C1, C2 and C3. Okay, and we have systems S1, S2 and S3. Okay, so we are going to bring in something called as the some facade. Okay, so the facade is responsible for talking to these three systems. Okay, S1, S2 and S3. Now C1, all the clients will talk to facade. So all the clients will use facade. Okay, so now what happens? So how clean is this code? I think you should clearly see this by now, right? So it is very clean. And let's say if I have to make the switch from S3 to S4, so how many places I need to go and switch? So that's the question. So you clearly know that I will simply remove the call and I will make the switch at facade, and all the clients will left intact. So there is no need to change each and every client. Okay, so this is a very clear design when it comes to interacting with multiple services or multiple systems. So let's remember that this is this very thumb rule, guys. So when you are talking to, say for example, x, y and z, okay, so write some function called f of which actually makes a call to all these three, rather than you calling x and you calling y and you calling z repeatedly. Okay, so it's always better to have a common interface or unified interface which talks to all the different functions. Okay, so no matter whether these are subsystems or it may be services, it may be some method calls, anything. Now whenever you are supposed to interact with multiple method calls, just make sure that you have some common method which makes all the calls respective calls, and then you depend on that method. So rather than you making a call directly to all individual methods, so if you make a call directly to all individual methods, you will end up something like this. Okay, so which you should avoid. So you should always depend on some sort of unified mechanism which takes care of all interactions. Okay, and you depend on that unified mechanism. So this is nothing but the facade, guys. So I think this gives you much more clarity. Okay, so let's see a very dummy example and see how we can actually build a simple facade. So it's very easy, guys. So let's say there is something called as service 1. Okay, service 1, so with some s1 method. Okay, I'm not going to do anything with this. Now let's say there is something called as service 2. Okay, so with s2 method, right? So I will just simply print s1, and the same thing I will do here. Okay, so here I will do s2. So when somebody is actually look at this client, so this assume that this is the client. Now I create an instance worth service 1. Now I will make the call to s1, so service 1 dot s1, and similarly I will actually create an instance for service 2. Okay, new service 2, and then I will make the call to s2. Okay, so this is not a facade. So you are actually trying to simulate the first scenario. So that is client talking to all individual services. Okay, so you are trying to implement this scenario. So instead of having this, you can do something different. So you can actually create something called as service facade. Okay, so which uses service 1 and service 2 internally. So let's say this is going to use service 1 and this is going to use service 2. Okay, and then it's going to expose some unified method. So let's say that public void some service. So let's say some service, okay, or some unified method. So this actually takes care of interacting with both service 1 and service 2. Okay, so as simple as this. Now somebody is making a call, so client actually should, instead of depending on individual services, they will create an object for facade. Okay, and then they will make the call to the unified service using facade. So some service. Okay, or I will name it a unified service. That makes much sense. Now you name according to your need. Okay, so this need not be s1, s2, s3. So this is how it is. So you as the client, you will depend on the unified service and let the unified service take care of all interaction with all backend systems. Okay, so then this is much better. So this is going to implement this sort of structure. Okay, so that's it, guys. So that's how it is. The facade is actually not be just at service or multiple subsystems and systems level. It could be from a simple method level. Okay, so from the point of interacting with multiple methods to designing classes, you can implement it everywhere. Okay, it's not just in one place, and this is the beauty of it. So you modify it at one place without affecting any client. Okay, so I think you got the point. I hope that you now understood what is a kind of a facade. Okay, so that's how it is, guys. So I am a big fan of this particular pattern. Okay, so there are numerous advantages of using this pattern. So it's not about just pattern, it's about your coding. Okay, I hope you understood it. See you in the next lecture.